Welcome back to Rhythm Method Area, guys. It's Labor Day weekend. You may have gotten a day off work. Let's talk about what history books don't. You have rights as an employee. As we speak, there are forces working to repeal those rights under the auspices of making America great again. There's a difference between corporatism, capitalism, and conservatism. Sadly, there is much overlap on the Venn diagram, though. Our laws are misunderstood if they're even understood at all. Let's say your boss doesn't like you, and he sticks you on shit detail, or tries to make your work day unbearable. He's an authoritarian. He's an ass kisser. That's what drew him to want to be the boss of someone else in the first place. Maybe he's a chauvinist. Maybe he's a racist or just a basic all-around asshole. You ever have a supervisor that enjoyed his job a little bit too much because he was a sadistic prick? What do? You quit. You look for a new job. What if they're forcing you to work overtime and fucking with your schedule to the extent that it makes looking for a new job ostensibly impossible? You need them for a reference. You have to be a model employer or else you'll lose your job and them as a reference for future employers. So you struggle with depression and anxiety as a result of your shitty work conditions. You need the job for the insurance that you need to obtain antidepressants and anti-anxiety medication just so you can be a functional cog in the machine. You haven't felt like a human being since you were a kid. What if it's not just you? What if your employer is shitting all over all the employees? All of you meet and plan a general strike. You form a union and you demand better wages and working conditions. And that's good. It's better to put labor laws on the books to protect everyone, though. And that's what we're celebrating this weekend. Our 40-hour work week, our benefits, our minimum wage, OSHA, Occupational Safety Hazards Agency, to protect workers from the conditions that the Irish and the Chinese worked in while building our nation as immigrants. Not unlike modern immigrants' working conditions. The Irish and Chinese were indentured servants. That's just another way of saying they were disposable slaves. This nation was built on the backs of slaves. This nation isn't unique in that. Every empire is built on the foundation of the institution of slave labor. Every single one of them, all the way back to Babylon. That's the base foundation of the social dominance hierarchy, the pyramid, the religion of civilizations, human beings as human resources, the dehumanization that's required to center a social system around slavery and colonialism. War is the method by which empires expand. Slavery is the method by which they are built. Okay? Propaganda must be masterfully dispensed to sell something so obviously stupid, narrow, and evil. Masterful? Maybe not. When someone is obviously dumb, as Candace Owens or Ben Shapiro are, considered to be legitimate speakers on behalf of conservatism, masterful. The point of propaganda is to create pressure by peers, to quit your bitching and get your ass to work, to get you to believe bullshit about freedom and American dreams and work yourself to death and then die. It works. It's working. You're employed, right? You're not a loser without a job. You're a human resource. What's a resource in capitalism? You're either fuel or you're the cog that drives the machine of consumption. Consume, obey, produce, reproduce, Ouroboros. That Leviathan cross. That's what you are to these parasitic vampires that rule the world. You're a human resource. Money isn't real. Human beings are. We're both consumers and producers. Individually, we are very weak and powerless, but together we shape the world and dominate over our environment. Together as a species, we hold power in one of two ways, collectively or economically. You see, that's what the Democratic Party hates the Squad for. They represent the people and not the money. They serve the people and not mammon. The GOP would do well to acknowledge the legitimacy of this movement and start representing the people that elect them. Okay, the conservative folks. The people of conservative persuasion had better wise up and wake up and stop believing that their representatives give a flat fuck about them. They're no better than the Democrats. The difference between the two parties is that they tell lies to appeal to your values. That value is generally described as fairness on the right and equality on the left. And we talked earlier about the difference between fairness and equality. It's subtle, but it's significant. It's substantial. I've addressed this in previous episodes. Maybe you saw Sanders on the Joe Rogan Experience. He's not radical. Okay? He's some basic common sense FDR type American representative. He's okay. For me, he's not quite left enough to balance out the power and influence of the corporatocracy, the oligarchy, the aristocracy. He's one step left after 3 to the right. And we'll see if he's too little too late. My money is on, we're fucked. We needed Stein or Sanders. Sanders fucked us. You know that, right? You remember when he wept before endorsing Clinton? You refused to run alongside and take Stein's spot on the green ticket. He's a fool. Why? Because he believed in you. He believed in us. He got fucked over by the DNC, and the people would rather see a clown in office than an established criminal. America made an impossible decision on November 8th, 2016. Most of us voted for the lesser of two evils, but our democracy isn't actually a democracy because it's been undermined by the Republicans and the Democrats. You know, the Republicans through gerrymandering, voter suppression, and the Democrats through rigging elections and sandbagging populist candidates. Neither of them like democracy. They operate in opposition to it. They collude against it as a philosophy at every opportunity. And the Republicans, well, they love uneducated voters.
We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
They're waging propaganda campaigns against academia because socialism is a more humanitarian philosophy for most people, whether they acknowledge that fact or not. Informed people know this. Something like 8 out of 10 psychology professors are leftists. To align to the right is to be an opportunist. They all know how wrong they are. And they don't actually believe what they sell you. Dave Rubin, Owens, Shapiro, Peterson, they're making a killing by peddling bullshit propaganda. They were anyway. They're being exposed for the hucksters that they are. And that's good. They're grifters. They're hucksters. They're charlatans. They're propagandists. And they're more and more, ever so becoming more and more so obsolete, ineffectual. But they are founded by an institution that would have you working in conditions that we fought to change, killed and were killed for, went to actual war for. The Heritage Institute, the Koch brothers, Charles and David, may they be reunited post-haste. All of those institutions are working against the rights of the worker. So let's talk about what working conditions were like before the labor movement fought and sometimes were killed in procuring your rights as an employee, because what those conditions were like is how the Republicans would like to see conserved. That America is what they want to bring back. That's where they think America was great. This is what it was like for workers when America was great. Child labor. You worked in environments, conditions that weren't temperature regulated. You were working 70 hours per week. Little kids, 10 years old, 70 hours a week in sweatshops for 40 cents per day. Barely enough money to exist on. And the reason is that their family, their parents, their mother and father, weren't making any more than that either. You had to have a bunch of kids just so that you could afford to pay rent. Slavery. The Union is what brought us out of slavery. Did we abolish slavery, or did we just make up another name for it? Labor Day is a day of celebrating our liberation from bondage far more than our Independence Day is. Okay, Independence Day is a celebration of nothing, really, a changing of the guard. If we lost the Revolutionary War right now, today, we'd be better off. We'd be Canada. We'd have access to health care and wouldn't be prosecuted for herbally self-medicating. Canada does not have the social justice issues that we have. The labor wars were brutal. A lot of people died fighting the corporatocracy, and the government was brought into the fight with the workers. The workers fought an armed conflict against the government and private security forces. The workers won, but the fight isn't over. It will never be over so long as people are human resources above human beings. It's going to take radical shift in priorities and values. What conservatives are conserving is working against the necessary evolution. And unless it's abandoned by a majority of the masses, then Revelations will be a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I tend to think we're fucked in that regard. Forgive them. They don't know what they do. It's not that we don't know, though. Our stupidity is more denial and ignorance than any lack of accessibility to information, if not education at this point. There's in the age of information, then ignorance is a choice. For the most part. Okay, so let's get into some of the history. 1869, the Knights of Labor was established. In 1877, the Great Railroad strikes took place over low wages, long hours, and brutal and dangerous working conditions. B&O Railroad, the Reading Railroad, from the Monopoly game, that was based on some real shit. Monopoly, as a game, was based on some real shit. It was based, that game, the Milton Bradley game, was made by a socialist to demonstrate in a game how capitalism will ultimately end in chaos. Okay? You ever played Monopoly? It takes forever for the game to end. And the majority of the time that it's played, one person's reveling in their own farts and everybody else is scrambling just to get into that position. And eventually, ultimately, somebody's going to throw the board upside down and walk out because somebody tried to make them a slave. That's what that game was designed to demonstrate. Ironically, it's one of the most high-selling games in history because it's a critique of capitalism. And it was a capitalistic success because it was so successful. It generated a lot of revenue and currency for Milton Bradley. Monopoly, those two railroads, they were based. And if you notice in that game, man, they have a set price. You can't build a hotel on them. You can't exploit labor to the nth degree. That's kind of a key function. We're not talking about Monopoly though. Maybe eventually I will get into the history of that game, but I'm talking about the actual labor wars that game was based on. Ohio, Baltimore, and Ohio, B&O, and then the Reading Railroads. They had massive strikes. The governor sent in state militias to dispense with them. The National Guard. They were outnumbered by the workers. And the National Guard and the militias were also reluctant to fire on the members, the strikers, because they were members of their own communities. So what happens? The feds get sent in, right? The feds don't know these people. Federal hired guns. Well, they didn't have any problem firing on the workers, and they killed about 10 and wounded about 25 in Maryland. In Ohio, the feds bayoneted 20 workers to death. Then you had the Haymarket riot. Someone threw a bomb. Nobody knows who it was. 8 cops were killed by friendly fire. 4 men that were never proven to have committed a crime were executed by hanging. They weren't even really suspected. They just were made an example of in the Haymarket riots. They just executed 4 people to tell the working class, don't fuck with the aristocracy. Don't fuck with the slave, the newfangled modern slavery. Don't try to fucking fight for your rights. Then the Burlington strike in 1888, where agents' provocateur tactics were implemented. That's where the Pinkertons, they They hired people to go in there, infiltrate the union, and then cause shit so that they could blame them for the ensuing violence. And that's still going on right now, even today, even with Antifa. You've got agents provocateurs trying to smear them by provoking violence. 1892, you got Coeur d'Alene. The mine was infiltrated again by another Pinkerton agent, and a battle ensued, and martial law was implemented. The Pinkertons were a private army, okay? They were a private agency used by corporations to break unions. 1898, you had the Battle of Verdun. That resulted in 14 dead workers. Colorado labor wars of 1903 through 1905. Ultimately, the workers would prevail. We got a lot of labor laws on the books because of that, including the 8-hour workday. And then you had the Battle of Blair Mountain in 1921, which was the largest armed insurgency since the Civil War. 10,000 miners against federal troops. So, your rights as a worker have been fought and sacrificed for, and that's what we're celebrating. The sacrifices of the workers that made our labor conditions better than anyone else's in the free world. Subsequently, your labor's being outsourced. We refuse to be a nation of slaves, so our labor is being undermined. Immigrants are brought in, and our work is outsourced into different other countries with more slack labor laws. I wasn't taught about the labor wars of the 19th and 20th century in school because I live in a free country where education is expensive to the point where it's not easily accessible. Public schools are funded by property taxes, so poor neighborhoods are severely underfunded. It's a vicious cycle, a vortex of poverty, crime, depression, addiction, abuse, and decay. You know, we have miniature shithole countries all over America. Some more gentrified than others. We have third world conditions in certain parts of this country. We're a proud people, though. Most of us actually know the struggle all too well. We experience it. I kind of think it's good for us to know poverty. It builds character and a sense of appreciation. And that's the problem. The legislators seldom ever really know what it's actually like to struggle at the bottom tiers of our socioeconomic pyramid. They think the ability to acquire an iPhone is tantamount to having access to a doctor. They're completely out of touch. It's so funny, it's not even funny. We have a lot of broke people blaming other broke people for their poverty. Why would they blame poor people for their situation? Because they're told to. Because they're proud. Because they want to believe something false rather than face a cold and ugly truth. Because they've never been told the truth about what it's really like when their politicians have their way. We know what it was like. Some of us are living it right now. You know, if you work for Amazon, if you're a teacher and you're driving Uber on your time off, correcting papers at red lights because you can't make ends meet. Teachers have been striking. Amazon boycotts, service sector strikes, fast food boycotts and strikes, Verizon strikes and boycotts, Uber sit-ins and boycotts and strikes. They help, but more attention needs to be paid. I only hear about labor movement demonstrations from very few select news groups that aren't corporate owned, or by my own inquiry into the interwebs, because I follow workers' issues in the news, because I don't have a formal education and I have no connection to the upper echelons of the corporatocracy. You know, I haven't played golf and kissed the right asses to move up the corporate ladder. The least of these is somewhere I might just find myself one day, unless I can figure out how to make a living on the internet or overthrow the system by implementing something a little more conducive to human dignity and the value of labor. Okay? I'm completely self-educated. I dropped out of fucking community college. This is what I'm telling you. We need a more fair and balanced and just way of separating the wheat from the chaff. Okay? Because there's a lot of brilliant, dude, some of the most brilliant people I know are selling coffee, Starbucks coffee, for tips. They're basically begging. Some of the brightest people I've ever met are working at car washes. And some of the dumbest motherfuckers I've ever met are in management positions in corporations. So, I don't know. This is why labor movements are important. Because it's the only thing that can really protect the rights of the worker. Because not all of us even want to be or can be doctors or lawyers or salesmen or rock stars or actors. You know, some of us need to do the plumbing. Some of us need to do garbage removal, sanitation. Some of us need to be electricians. There's no reason why the disparity of the economics, the resources should be so disparate. And millennials, young people that are on the internet all the time, that don't have jobs because they all got shipped overseas, they're embracing socialism. Why? For one thing, younger people are less racist. Despite the efforts of online white supremacist recruiters, racism can't really exist when everybody has the same base from which to launch from. Sure, people will still be racist, but it will just be an opinion and not systemic in our societal policy. Wage disparity will be addressed. Equality of opportunity is kind of a big deal. Access to health care that isn't contingent upon your obedience to an employer, an exploiter, that isn't beholden to acknowledge or respect your rights as an employee that you may not even be aware that you have, thanks to unions, Social Security, not in the sense that you're probably familiar with, but in terms of retirement. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Social Security in the sense that you have the right and the means to protest unfair labor practices and unsafe working conditions. So let's take a look at some of the data on millennials and socialism. The reality is that any egalitarian society with justice as a cornerstone in building it were historically conquered by the First and Second Reichs. And now the Third Reich is rotting from the inside because the corruption is so ever pervasive, that its decay so all-encompassing, that its decline is inevitable. Nothing can save us from the inevitable collapse of our empire. A lot of us are so desperate for any kind of change that we're rooting for our own demise as a global superpower. We want America to be great again. That's so naive. We cannot go back in time or make time stand still. America was never great for all of us. We gotta make America great for once, and then move on from there. For all of us. Be the America that we're told that we are in our history classes. You know, contend with our karma. Karma is real, okay? It's just not understood in Western culture. Hong Kong is on fire right now for the same reasons. Karma literally means cause and effect. Are you going to argue with me that causes don't have effects and vice versa? It's not what goes around comes around. It's some kind of magical cosmic order. Although given a long enough time span, an infinite one, it does work like that. How it really works is that you treat people with dignity and they treat someone else with dignity, possibly because you treated them with it, and it gets paid forward like a cheesy 90s movie. Everything is paid forward, whether positive or negative. Our karma is one of slavery and genocide. That's bad karma, dude. It didn't begin with us, though. It began as far as we're told about 5,000 years ago. So it's going to take some time to rectify. It might not be atoned in this eon as this species. It might never be rectified because that's the nature of the Leviathan. The karma of the Leviathan, or the devil. You know, our evil nature type shit, our original sin type shit. Slavery. Look, Thomas Jefferson and the forefathers, the framers of this new system of representative democracy, knew they were screwing their descendants over. They knew it as they practiced it. It could have only happened in a new world with a, quote, revolution that wasn't really a revolution. Within a century, we were England's disruptive stepchild again, still dependent on Europe, unable to build an independent nation that lived up to the ideals and principles of the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights. Still can't live up to them because our Constitution needed to be amended to redefine who an American or who a human actually is more than a couple times. And there are loopholes in it to keep the institution of slavery operating by different terminology, to dehumanize one another like Jesus said not to. Labor Day is the day Grover Cleveland designated for the workers, the actual builders, because we were having labor riots, revolts, even battles over factory owners using human resources as slave labor, wage slavery, debt slavery. They were recruiting immigrants to work in their fields and factories and mines because our legal system protected the rights of workers, the rights that we as workers fought for. That's happening today still. They outsource your job to China. Now Hong Kong is on fire. France is on fire. South America is literally on fire. The Amazon is on fire. I hate to always bring it back to New Age woo-woo shit, but the stars are aligning for a radical shift in the paradigm. It's just time. We live in a new world. Will the order be brave enough to change with the times? How much is your time worth? What kinds of gizmos is your economy going to provide you with to sell out your future on this planet? How valuable is a human life? Let's get real. The generators aren't providing the people with anything of real consequential value anymore. You aren't free at all. You aren't free if all you can afford to do with your time is work. Who among us have jobs that provide any kind of deeper, meaningful satisfaction from? Look, I could go on for hours on this subject, but I'm a working stiff still, and I want to spend some of my Labor Day weekend with my friends and family, so I'm going to cut this one a little short. I could go on. I could do an hour on any one of the incidents of the labor wars, the battles, the fights, the riots. I could rant about socialism and capitalism really for an eternity, and I plan on it, just not all today, okay? I hope you enjoy your Labor Day. And if you see one, thank a union member. And I'll be spending my Labor Day afternoon with my brothers and sisters in the local 535 steelworkers. Strength and solidarity, comrades. Until next week.